This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Episode 3, Chapters 5 and 6, 10,000 Years of Tradition. Act 1, Welcome Penitents. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Fifth, a Locked Tomb podcast where brand spanking new novitiates explore the Locked Tomb series for the first time, while a couple of dried out bone witches cackle over how little they really know. We are currently reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we are taking a quick break from training with our swords to dig through chapters 5 and 6. I am your host, Hannah, and I love a training montage as much as the next necromancer, and the next necromancer is Marie. Marie, what is your training montage music?
So embarrassingly, it's a lot of 2010s pop hits because I have used the same running playlist since 2016. And my playlist does include Jason Derulo bop with the phrase, "If I'm lucky, I'll meet ya," flip side of the graveyard. So it might be perfectly appropriate for this particular training montage.
It is definitely, perfectly appropriate, but point of order, there is nothing embarrassing about liking 2010s pop hits. That's the last time music was good. That's all I listen to.
I would like to point out that I teach 20-year-olds, and when they don't know what to put on and they are embarrassed to put on a playlist for their peers, they default to 2010s pop hits on Spotify.
Oh, yeah.
And there is nothing
Oldies
that makes me feel more ancient.
I used to put on oldies too. All right, well, we're going to be working hard today, putting two brand new cavaliers through their paces, so please help me welcome Brooke and John. John, what music are you listening to as you practice the 1,000 parries?
Honestly, an even more basic answer than Murray. I'm listening to like early 2000s hip hop probably.
Yes.
And then like a bunch of EDM thrown in there, some Taylor Swift remixes. But like honestly, DJ Khaled's probably present in about 40% of those songs. He's showing up all the time. And then just like a bunch of other stuff, maybe some Skrillex.
I might
like honestly
need to borrow that,
yeah,
John.
in there. But yeah, I can send that to you, Murray, for sure.
Okay, Brooke, what music is in the background as you prepare to become the greatest fighter of your house?
I'm learning I have nothing to be ashamed of. My playlist is definitely all bangers from the late 2000s as well. There's definitely going to be some Black Eyed Peas, a lot of Black Eyed Peas probably, a good amount of Fall Out Boy, Panic at the Disco, hopefully some Rihanna. What about you, Hannah?
Sorry, this is exceptional. I'm so proud of you all. Because my fight montage, training montage music is the true OG. I will just be listening to Eye of the Tiger over and over. All right. Okay, so final question before we have to go repaint our faces again. Go ahead and give me just like a short phrase that sums up chapters 5 and 6. John, do you want to go first?
Yep. The world's least heroic training montage. So it's
so cold. It's just so mean.
I am not in disagreement. I'm going with that. We're flopping over a bar that is probably set a little too low for what seems to be a relatively high-risk situation.
Going in half-cocked. My answer is that walking half a step behind someone is a recipe for more than just a bruised ego. I feel like John talked about tripping over his own feet last time, and I'm a person who trips over my own feet and other people's.
My phrase is sisters, not twins, because I enjoy a good meme.
Okay, well, while I walk half a step behind Marie for the next hour and a half trying to learn all of her meme knowledge, let's do that hard work of getting into Episode 3, 10,000 Years of Tradition. Act 2, a skull puking another smaller skull.
This section of Frontline Fifth is safe for anyone who hasn't read past Chapter 6.
Let's recap. Chapter 5, Harrow tells Gideon to act accordingly. Harrow paints Gideon's face. Harrow issues several threats. In Chapter 6, Gideon acts accordingly. Aglamene gives Gideon a sword. Harrowhark and Gideon say goodbye to the Ninth House.
Before we get into kind of a deeper discussion of what happens in these chapters, Marie, what meme is that?
I don't know that it's necessarily a meme, but it's just if you have watched too much beauty YouTube, the joke is when you put on your eyebrows, they're supposed to be sisters, not twins.
Really?
Yes.
I once saw a threading esthetician to do my eyebrows. And at the end of it, she's looking at me and she goes, well, maybe like cousins. Not what you want to hear from your eyebrow esthetician.
when Aglamene is teaching Gideon, and she tells her that her hands, when she is learning to do rapier and parry, should be sisters, not twins.
Yes. And I actually, speaking of Brooke's thing, I feel like if I were trying to do this, they would be like third cousins. Like, I do not coordinate well across. It would not go well for me. All right. Okay, so let's talk about what happens here. So chapter 5 actually opens, Gideon has just agreed to be Harrow's cavalier. And chapter 5 opens with Gideon and Harrow hanging out in a library while Gideon tries to paint her face to look like a Ninth House nun.
Gorgeous. Hot.
I look like a douche.
You know what? More than one thing can be true at a time. Harrow's actually received some more information from the first house, and she asks Gideon to kind of think about what the implications are. So there will be no retainers, no attendants, no domestics. Do you have any response to that?
I mean, as somebody who doesn't know what this means coming up, no clues. This is what they imply is that it's just going to be a no distractions environment of whatever. There's basically 16 people from the 8 different houses, and then some crumbly old hierophants, another excellent word.
That's a good one.
And that therefore this means that Gideon has to be super ninth, because there's only 2 people from the ninth. There's 2 people from these other 7 houses. There's everything that you do is like super visible. There's no big crowds in order to kind of like dilute how her actions. That is what they wanted us to think.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah, you can't hide in the crowd. You're like, it's very, very obvious who's there, and it's just, you can keep track of everyone. Like it's law of small numbers, right? Like it's gonna be very easy to see if someone doesn't know what they're doing or keep an eye on somebody, that type of thing.
Is there a more malicious way to interpret this? That there's few people to recognize if you go missing?
Oh gosh.
Well, no support structure either. Yeah, just like you can't have help.
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I feel like Gideon takes us the other direction. She's like, there aren't going to be like a whole bunch of people there, so let me just not wear fucking face paint. And Harrow's like, no, it really matters. Because this is kind of, this is like Harrow's big thing is, I desperately need you to actually look like you have your shit together. I really need you to look like a Ninth House cavalier so that the other houses don't figure out that the Ninth House is, to quote Gideon, broke and nearly extinct. She needs Gideon to get good at the rapier so she looks like a trained cavalier and act like just a Ninth House classic.
A Ninth House classic where we don't tell anybody anything. I get the idea that they have the vibe that they are mysterious as hell, even to the other houses.
Yeah, which is intriguing, right? Like, this is a world of necromancy, but the Ninth House is its own deep dark.
They're the locked tomb. They've got libraries with mysteries.
And forbidden necromancy magic. Or I guess I don't know, a gray area? Like, we don't, like, how... Like, if none of the houses really know each other all that well, like, who's to say? Like, are we, like, maybe moral relativism? Maybe you're allowed to raise, like, bodies as from the dead is on like the Ninth House and not on the second house or whatever. I don't know.
We don't know how different the cultures are on these different houses. We don't know how different the like moral expectations or the expectations of what you should look like and what you should do are.
Because it's also true that we don't know that the other houses don't know each other. We just know that the other houses don't know jack shit about the Ninth. And we also know that the Ninth knows jack shit about the other houses other than kind of general, like their general levels of power.
Yeah, probably what we know, given like just the persona dramatis bit there, vibes.
Yeah, we're running on vibes.
Yeah.
Well, and so we get like a tiny info dump as Gideon is practicing walking like half a step behind Harrow. She gets to pick up like little bits of conversation between Iglamine and Harrow. And so that there's a little, I've got a couple quotes here. Naturally, it's a competition. The third house will be the best equipped. The second will have spent half their lives at the front. It's a grayer house I worry about.
Yeah, color curious.
I assumed grayer just meant like less defined, right? Like at least for me, like it just meant like, oh, it's like a less well-known house or a less defined house. Like maybe one of the houses we just don't know much about comparatively to like the third house will be equipped. Second house will, obviously have warriors, I guess, spending their life at the front, right? Like they're going to be well-trained warriors. So I assumed like a grayer house just meant we don't really know much about some of these other houses or like how they're even going to show up.
Oh my God, I started going a little like Harry Potter house-esque because like they have colors that kind of like suit them. So like we have the second, they're like apparently these big powerful like fighter types based off of 2 sentences or even just 2 little blips. They're like red, they're crimson, they are full Gryffindor colors. The grayer houses, it could actually be describing their personalities. They're more mysterious.
Yeah.
Which is agreeing more or less with John, but adding some Harry Potter.
I love it.
Which I do.
Or maybe they could just be more dead, right? You get like grayer as you turn more dead. Maybe like
Oh my God!
Is it like...
Wait, this is something we haven't brought up, but like who is the king exactly? Because in the first letter, this was like a few chapters back, they call him the first reborn. Is he alive? Who reborned him?
Himself, apparently.
What?
This is
I don't know.
fascinating.
He's God.
Going back to our resurrector, are we all resurrected? Are any of us alive? I think I'm reading into it a little bit too much, but I find the ways they describe their emperor king figure to be curious.
Oh, I do have something that I wanted specifically to go into. And I don't know how much of you are diseased and spend time on TikTok, so this might become very obvious very quickly. Okay.
Literally none. Yeah.
I've never
Fantastic. Okay. Brooke, how often do you ever think about the Roman Empire? Like if you had to give like monthly, weekly, whatever.
Stupid Roman Empire thing. I do not.
Okay. Hannah, how often do you think about the Roman Empire?
Like maybe once a year.
Okay, I would say like I think about the Roman Empire like fairly often. I would say like it comes up like when I think about things like maybe like, every like 2 or 3 weeks for me. How often do you think about the Roman Empire, John?
Literally every day.
Yeah.
What? Okay, we just went through a perfectly linear or a perfectly scaled volume of thinking about the Roman Empire. What is going on? How come I never think about the Roman Empire and John thinks about it every day?
Every day.
Again, I'm not on TikTok, but I've been on Instagram Reels enough, and my wife watches enough TikTok where it's like, apparently this is like a male thing, where it's just like, ladies, ask your husband like how often he thinks about the Roman Empire, and like most men apparently think about it every day. And I would say, yeah, like just reading this book, I've thought about the Roman Empire. Like every day I've read this book, I've thought about the Roman Empire just through something.
What is your
and then
like
obviously-
upbringing exposure that just instills so much Roman Empire imagery in your head?
Let's see. All the Total War games. There's been like 7 different video games where you can play as a Roman legionnaire.
Video
like,
games.
Almost all of your strategy like games have some type of like basically like formation stuff, and that normally comes from the Romans. So you have like phalanxes, which aren't, I guess, totally Roman, but like centurions, basically, like like it just aqueducts. How often like I think about aqueducts like on a fairly regular basis, and like that just like brings me down the Roman rabbit hole. I don't know. There's just so many. How do you not think about the Roman Empire like all the time?
I was playing The Sims while you were playing War Games.
So the reason that I bring it up is because, especially with the naming system, you'll notice that like Harrow does not have the same last name as her parents. Her parents don't have the same last name as each other. That's a super duper Roman naming system thing where you get a name that's based on like your own characteristics.
When do you
Right?
get that?
Like
Is
like
this
kind of
physical
like as you're
characteristic?
coming as like kind of like as you're coming up, it's like why all of like Caesar Augustus and like it's like why all of like trying to keep track of like the emperors, you can't like figure out who's related to each other because they don't have a family name.
That's fascinating.
Right? So it's like that is what's kind of going on. So like that's a very like thing that's Roman, but also having all of these additional names that like the Necrolord Prime, Hour of Resurrector, like the First Reborn, like all of those things, like those additional titles and names and things, like that feels very Roman and like imperial.
It also feels very Catholic to me.
It feels very Catholic as well,
Yeah.
right? So I think
But
that like it,
Lictor is actually like a Roman term as well. That's like the only thing I Googled. So I was like, oh,
I forgot what is a lictor in terms of like Roman stuff, because lich. I think lich like is like has something to do with like bones and stuff. If you just take that,
Ghouls.
So I think it was a Latin official. It's okay. Sorry. The name Lictor, this is from Reddit. So, you know, like asterisks. The name Lictor is said to be a portmanteau of lictor, but spelled with an I, which is the Latin official, which is what I found. And lich, which is, as you said, kind of evil undead, soulless.
so it's a necromantic.
Roman official.
Yeah. And I love that for them. And I'm really excited for all of our new friends to become potentially, and you know, hopefully Harrow can become a necromantic civil servant, as she always dreamed she would be. But she is worried about it. And the timeline is short, right? These chapters were really short, and that's partially because the timeline is short. Gideon is trying to figure out how to be a cavalier in like 3 weeks or something. So it's really not until like the last day that Aglamene even gives her offhand weapon to practice with. Aglamene hands over, she reforged the sword of Ortis's great-grandmother, who was like the last decent cav that existed in the house, and gives it to Gideon along with obsidian knuckle knives, which again, I just feel like would look so badass. I'm trying to think of something more intimidating than obsidian Wolverine, and I've got nothing.
I have questions because I feel like every fantasy book or like every like genre like treats obsidian as like slightly different things. Like some like obsidian's like a magical like sharpest thing in the universe in some like fantasy settings, and then others it's just like kind of a brittle
Cheap shit.
like brittle, yeah, cheap shit, or like it can be anywhere in between. So like when they were like, oh, they gave her like obsidian knuckle knives, so like, oh, are they like really sweet? Like, is obsidian really cool in this universe,
I
or is it
think
like,
it's
oh, like, these are
vibes.
shitty knuckle knives?
It's the vibes. It's the dark with the light reflected on it. It's the greasy dark, the oily rock, right?
Yeah.
Well, and you have to remember that obsidian is at least obsidian is what like Native Americans used for arrowheads in some places, right? And so it's incredibly sharp. Like it
takes an edge really well. It is like, it's always described as rock glass, right? It does take an edge really well, and actually it is also famously quite brittle.
Yeah.
So I think it's not something you would want to make something like that was going to get hit over and over, which kind of defeats the point of the parrying, but it would be sharp as all hell. I think it would be terrifying.
Little slicey slice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I very definitely think like it's vibes, but also you're working one-handed. Like just forget that you even have a second hand and don't use it.
All right, well, then it's literally just time to go. The shuttle comes and Harrow and Gideon are about to board it to the Ninth House. And there's this, actually, I think quite a lovely moment of goodbye where Harrow kind of leads her house in prayer. And, you know, Gideon kind of thinks it's put on, but Harrow is like edge of tears or actually crying, right?
I think the thing that Gideon does that is like her kind of like emotional moment is that she saluted Aglamene as crisply and as enthusiastically as a soldier on her first day of service, and was pleased when her teacher rolled her eyes.
I love that a lot for both of them.
Yep. It's going to be the most heartfelt moment we see.
But it's got to be like kind of terrifying, right? I mean, no matter how badly Gideon wanted to get away, again, this is the first time they're going off planet ever, 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 ever.
Yeah.
It's not even just off planet. It's not like other cities exist. Well, like, she's literally known the same, like, 300 people for her entire life.
Yeah. I like that they use the words dizzyingly unsure. So she's balancing, like, absolutely getting her freedom with, like, oh, we have no idea what comes next.
The way I took it was like she was unsure, but like the more she thought about it, the more she's like, this is great. And because like this house is going to die, she exploded crux, like a garbage bag full of soup for good measure. Like it just seems like she was like, oh yeah, this is gonna be crazy, and I'm a little unsure. And then it's like, oh, but like this is also gonna be great. Like screw this place, like we're out, basically.
Yeah. That pretty much wraps it up for chapters 5 and 6. All right, well, before we redo our face paint in preparation for leaving the only home we've ever known en route to a mysterious trial, it's time for a game. Interstitial. I read them for the articles. This week, dear listeners, in homage to Harrow's musty little library, we're playing a more literary game. Brooke, let's put 90 seconds on the clock. And my Ninth Nunlets, here's our question of the day. What are the real names of Gideon's dirty magazines? Go!
Lewd tongues, dirty tales, and talk from the Ninth.
Ooh, that's good. Bon appetit.
Magnificent sheaths.
No. Bona-fide fantasies.
Boot strap-ons, getting fucked for space capitalism.
Oh my god. So much commentary. Drop Dead Gorgeous.
Boned Weekly.
8th wonder of the world.
To the knucklebone. No one can hear you moan in space.
Oh my god. How about One Flesh, One End? Although obviously that is better for a porno than it is for a magazine.
Maybe it sounds like a sex toy.
Sexy Librarians of the Sixth?
Reborn to Bone. I don't think we know the difference between titty magazines and pornos. There's a line.
This whole podcast has been so millennial. Like we don't do porno mags. Like everyone's just naming doing porno titles. Like no, half the stuff wouldn't fit on a magazine. It's like Playboy, Hustler, Penthouse. They're all like 2 syllables. They fit like at a title.
Bone Zone.
Yeah, Bone Zone. Yeah, that's a great one.
Get in the zone, Bone Zone.
Oh boy.
Oh, okay. Well, it's clear that we have a lot of reading material to get through before we head off to the first house. So I'm going to let Brooke and John go. I know they're anxious to sign off. But first, it is time for Rampant Speculation. Act 3. Tell me the implications. Brooke and John, it's that time again. We may be a little sore from doing 1,000 parries, but we're mostly just aching to hear your conspiracy theories. So my novice calves, what the fuck is happening?
I think that Hunger Games really ruined us in some ways, because I think John mentioned it in the last episode, that there's just some idea, there's this competition, this is a dark and kind of creepy world. Is this going to be a Hunger Games situation? We don't know. There's up to 8 spots to fill. There's this idea that people can be sent home of their own volition, or at least maybe it's not of their own volition, but rather they failed out at the thing. And is that true? Or is that just a nice thing you say to get people to show up? I'm vaguely worried. I don't know if that is just me being ruined by Hunger Games, though. John, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm still going strong on my answer that I think this is the conspiracy is that everyone's houses are in decline, and that's the reason for this, and we're trying to save the necromantic kingdom, or I see nothing to shake me off that path, but I'm probably horrifically wrong, and I can't wait to be horrifically wrong as we go deeper into the book. But that is my prediction: is all the houses have declined, and all hell's about to break loose.
Well, I guess we'll see if any of that happens next time, when John and Brooke touch down in the first house next week to help us explore Gideon the Ninth, chapters 7 and 8.
If you, dear listener, are like Brooke and John and reading along for the first time, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontline5th.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok, which are both linked in the show notes. If you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And if you didn't like it, feel free to lie. Now, let's head off to sleep, my fellow baby necros, because Mommy Marie and Daddy Hannah have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Get in, losers. We're going speculating. Warning, this portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and like 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Nona the Ninth. If that's not what you want, turn back now. Oh, thank God they're gone, because Marie, I am dying to spoil some things. Act 4. Another cave filled with old religious nutjobs. Do you want to talk a little bit about the whole Roman thing?
Yes. Yes, I do.
I cannot believe that John actually immediately was like, I think about Romans every day.
And he knew exactly where this was going, even if you guys didn't, because again, like, you had to be kind of terminally on. Like, it was a thing, I don't know how long ago, that went through TikTok, and then everything that goes through TikTok eventually makes it to Reels like a month later. I thought it was so funny to think about, like, how everything in the 9 houses is like so Roman coded, and then you think about, why would that possibly be? And then I was like, oh, we can just go through this and illustrate why that might possibly be.
John is the millennial man, and I don't even mean our co-host, I'm talking about God. Like, it just, like, it is hysterical, the degree to which, and I go back and forth. God, I go back and forth on whether or not he is an okay person.
No,
whether
he's
he
not.
like had any. I think he had
not.
some good intentions, but he
no.
is definitely at his core someone who thinks incredibly highly of himself and has no care at all for what other people think.
We were talking about how we have massive egos.
Yes,
and we know it, and we really like ourselves. He is the key. Has a massive ego, and that is the only thing that he cares about is being right. Yeah. He does not care about being good. Like, if we're gonna take that moral alignment, he is true evil.
Yeah. Maybe I'm just too naive. I just, like, there's this part of me that wants to believe that he had that his goal was truly, hope for humanity, but I definitely think you're right that at its core, he does want to be right. Like, I think they were right to dismiss the faster than light travel thing, but the reason they dismissed it is not because it wasn't going to happen, or it wasn't going to happen well, or it was only going to be trillionaires. The real reason they dismissed it was because it was getting funded and they were not.
Exactly.
Like, it's very much an us versus them thing, and if you are not on my side of the line, then I will literally blow you into shrapnel.
And I just, like, kind of like went through some kind of like theories on the resurrection and like what actually happened, and like his, like, you reread what he says happened at the end and who caused it and what actually happened.
He changes his story.
He keeps changing his story, and it's like, who killed all the people? It wasn't the bomb.
Yeah, it's as if he did not set off fucking.
But it's, like, no, it's not even, like, reread those again. It is not the bomb. He kills them before the bomb can. Specifically because that will give him enough necromantic power to keep doing what he's doing. Like, to keep, like, he knows that there's more out there. And so then you have to ask, so was it actually, like, nuclear bombs that killed the Earth? Or did he actually kill the Earth himself?
For his own reasons, like, because he wanted to be listened to and he wanted people to pay attention to him. It's not as if they couldn't have, like, delayed further. I mean, it happens basically because the faster than light travel people are about to take off, and because he wants to punish them, as opposed to, like, you could have just let them take off. It's not like the Earth dies then and there. You still have time to negotiate with the people on the planet, but he's just done. The second that people are going to defy him, it's unacceptable. And so it's, I guess, not surprising that he would be exactly the kind of person who would be so into, like, Roman, like, conquerors, about the idea of an empire, about the idea of, like, this technological master, like, civilization where everyone is free and it's democratic, except if you pay attention to at all, you're like, except for all of the women and all of the poor people and all the people who don't own land and all the, like,
And I feel like it's very important to note that we are not conflating our co-hosts.
Oh, no. Sorry,
Opinions
John,
or
our co-host, is
is
such a nice guy. John, our co-host, is fucking adorable. He is such a sweetie.
He is so opposite to Jod.
Yes. We're going to call him Jod. That's what we'll do. Jod is Jod. And then there's John.
And then there's
who's our
John,
friend.
who also thinks about the Roman Empire all the time, but primarily because he's a gamer.
Because he plays too many video games.
Yeah.
Which he gave up a significant portion of video games so that he could be on this podcast every week, which I think is cute. He's like playing a lot less World of Warcraft.
Oh, bless him.
I know.
Oh, what a man.
Oh man. Okay. The other thing I wanted to talk about this chapter is like, again, like discrepancies between what Harrow thinks is going to happen and what actually happens, because Harrow is super, super smart, but she also is wrong a lot. And part of that is like lack of data, but part of it is just assumptions she makes. So we talked last time about the assumption that like she assumes the Cavalier is just kind of like a, I don't know,
Bodyguard.
you know, yeah,
Accessory.
like a bodyguard, an accessory. That's exactly right. That it's just like something you have to have so that you look appropriate, as opposed to something that's truly integral to the process. And the other one that I think is interesting is her and Iglamine talking about what to expect. And the first thing that Harrow says is, naturally it's a competition, even though they don't say it. But it's fucking not.
It's
like,
never been a competition.
Explicitly in
Not.
that letter, they talk about how they want 8 saints to make it, which is all of them. Like, she just immediately goes into this space where it's this antagonistic thing. And to be fair, she's always had to defend her whole life. Like, Harrow is a shell of, you know, permanent bone pushing back on the entire world. But it's still like really sad. And then it's also interesting, Iglamine goes straight to like the third and the second being the best prepared.
Yeah.
And we don't ever really know enough about the houses to like really know why the third is considered to be so, you know, like intensely
I get the thing
powerful.
That it's basically just kind of like the third is the Kennedys.
They are like just royalty and everyone knows it.
When you have all of these kind of like old money families and they're all in one place and they're always going to have all of the political power, it's like the third house is political power and the second house is military power. And so, of course, those are the two that you're going to have to worry about.
I get that. And like Harrow comes back with basically she's worried about the sixth house because anybody can learn to fight, but hardly anyone learns to think, which is a great line. But again, it's never a question of like, who should I collaborate with or team up with? It's just a question of who to look out for.
Yep. There are 2 things. One of them is a very funny to me that I didn't catch probably even like you catch it on a reread after Harrow, which is
I know exactly what you're gonna say.
the threat that Harrow makes where she tells Gideon where she like doesn't do exactly what she wants. She'll mix bone meal in with her like meal, like her like oatmeal or something, and she'll punch her way out
Of her stomach. And I am sitting there being like, at least this witch is consistent. Like she knows exactly the best way to murder someone.
And Gideon like doesn't even, Gideon's like, oh yeah, like that's not even like a colorful like exaggerated threat, like that is something she would do.
Right, that fully, she's like, that fully checks out.
Like,
and she does.
And it's like, God damn it, Tansen. Like, every time she has, like, these throwaway lines, right? But there's
you
also...
have to wonder how much she plans this in advance. Like, did she go back and reread through Gideon the Ninth and be like, hey, well, maybe we'll make that real? Like, or did she know when she wrote this that it was going to come to fruition?
I am so curious. There's another one where, again, this is one where it takes a while to pay off. So like Bone Meal takes another book to pay off. This next one is going to have a payoff at the end of the book. And I remember at a vulnerable moment when I was rereading Gideon, we won't talk about it. And
Except we are going to talk about it.
Except... because that's what this whole fucking podcast is my need to continually reread these books. I was listening to it on the way to work, and I almost cried on the way to work because it's this moment where Harrow says, I think it's like at the end, like Harrow's like crying and Gideon makes fun of her and says, "Do you want my hanky?" And Harrow says, "I want to watch you die."
God, I didn't pick up on that at all.
And Gideon says,
that is
"Yeah, maybe,
devastating.
But you won't do it here." And I'm like, "No,
Right.
you won't."
But you're gonna have to be careful
will.
what you wish for, because
Exactly.
you are gonna have to deal with the full consequences of watching the most important person in your entire universe die in front of you on your behalf. Like, oh, gives me goosebumps. I get that.
Yeah, that's fun.
I know what you mean about the, like, I get emotional with a lot of these things. I cried in lab twice listening to Gideon in the section where we're learning about Harrow's birth story, and just the weight that everybody bears. But then I also, this week, I was crying on the train home for Nona because, and for Cam and Pal. We don't need to go into it. We're not going to go into it today.
No, not today. We'll save that for, months ahead. Hopefully.
Months hence. All right. Well, these were kind of a short set of Cavalier montage chapters. It looks like we're going to have to wait to see if all of that montage training pays off. So we'll be back next week to run through chapters 7 and 8. If you want to follow along with us, our reading calendar is available on our website at frontline5th.podbean.com. And you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, which are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you didn't enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. Finally, if you have any fun theories you want to share with us, feel free to email us at frontline5th@gmail.com. And with that, I'll just remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission, because, ghosts. Bye!
Bye! Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast starring Marie Adamaco, Hannah Grunwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Marie Adamaco, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Muir, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast.